Hey everyone, I am Jessica Levy, an associate professor of practice at Washington University in St. Louis.
And I'm Ashley Kuykendall, one of the co-chairs of the West County Community Action Network, a local organization focused on, among other things, voting rights in Missouri.
So Ashley and I decided to do this video because we know there's a lot of information out there. In fact, a lot of misinformation out there about your voting options this year. And we figured there were a lot of people like us who are confused by it all. So we wanted to clear some of it up. So Ashley, let's get started. Let's assume that I'm already registered to vote, as everyone should be by now. And if not, please do. But I'm still confused about the best way to actually vote in this pandemic. Can you just talk me through it?
Absolutely. So there are a few different options that folks have, but definitely the most straightforward option is to vote in person on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. You can take an acceptable form of ID like a utility bill, a student ID, a driver's license, or your voter card to the polls. Make sure you check your polling place on the Secretary of State's website because they might have changed. But as long as you're in line between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m., you're allowed to vote.
So that's good to know. So I just need some sort of photo ID. I don't need my license.
That's right. You don't need a photo ID to vote in the state of Missouri.
Okay, so voting on Election Day, that's pretty straightforward. But what if I'm worried about doing that, either because of the long lines or actually because of COVID? What do I do then?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to vote before Election Day, you can either use absentee voting or mail-in voting.
Okay, so can you explain the difference between absentee and mail-in?
Totally. So a lot of people are probably pretty familiar with absentee voting. That's been around for a long time in Missouri and is essentially a set of pre-approved reasons why you might need to vote before Election Day. So some of those are like being out of your jurisdiction on Election Day, being a poll worker, being confined due to illness or caring for someone else who is. And new this year is the reason for being high risk for COVID. Mail-in ballots, on the other hand, are brand new in 2020 for Missouri, and that's where anyone in our state can return a mail-in ballot via the USPS for any reason.
So you don't need a reason to do mail-in ballot.
That's right.
Okay, but regardless, I've still heard that some people would rather do absentee ballots over mail-in ballots. So why would that be?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways that you can return an absentee ballot, and only one way to return a mail-in ballot. So for absentee voting, you can actually go in person to your local election authority anytime between today and the day before Election Day to cast your ballot in person. You can also request your absentee ballot via mail, fill it out at home and drop it off at your local election authority in person, or you can mail it back. But for mail-in ballots, they have to be returned to your local election authority by the USPS by mail only. You can't drop it off anywhere in person.
So absentee doesn't necessarily mean you can't vote in person. You just need to do it before Election Day.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, and I have to use the US Post Office to return a mail-in ballot.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up. So in order to expedite that process too, you'll want to make sure to put a stamp on the envelope and mail it as quickly as you can.
Okay, so how do I request either of these ballots?
So there's a form on the Secretary of State's website or your local election authority's website that you can fill out. Depending on which kind of ballot you want, you'll just check a different box on the form. So if you're requesting an absentee ballot and you want to get it in the mail, you can submit that form by email, fax, the mail itself, or you can go in person and request it. But if you're requesting a mail-in ballot, you have to do that either in person at your local election authority or by mail. But if you're going to use that option that we talked about earlier, where you vote absentee in person before Election Day, you can just go to your election authority, request the ballot, fill it out, and submit it right then and there.
Okay, so the main difference between a mail-in and absentee is that for an absentee ballot, you can submit your request via email or fax, or you can, if you want to vote in person, you can show up to your election authority to request your ballot and vote at the same time.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so we keep saying local election authority. What does that mean?
Yeah, so each county is individually responsible for administering their own elections. So on your county's website, there will be a tab that says something like elections or voter information. You can click on that to find the location of your local election authority, or you can always Google something like the name of your county plus voter information.
Okay, so now we know the difference between absentee and mail-in, and even how to request those ballots. But I've also heard that some of these ballots need to be notarized. And to me, that adds a layer of complexity and is a little intimidating and confusing. So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, to break it down, if you're an absentee voter who is either confined due to illness or caring for someone who is, or if you are at high risk for COVID, then you do not need to have your ballot envelope notarized. But everybody else who's voting absentee or using a mail-in ballot has to have their sealed ballot envelope signed and stamped by a notary before they submit it.
Okay, so let's talk deadlines.
Yeah, so this is so much information and it's a lot to remember. I know that you and I looked all over the internet for an easy step-by-step decision-making guide to navigate this process, and we couldn't find one. So we did our research and we created one for ourselves, and now we're going to share it for you and anyone else to use. You can find this decision-making guide at bit.ly/MoVotes2020 guide, or on our Instagram page at MoVotes2020. And it includes everything you need to register to vote, to request a ballot, to find a notary, anything and everything for the process to vote in Missouri this November.
Great. And we know that this is going to be a long process, and many of you are going to have questions throughout from now until Election Day. So we really encourage you to put your questions either in the comments below or send them to us through our email, which is movotes2020@gmail.com. And we will be answering those questions both within the comments and also in subsequent videos that we'll be posting. So please share this video with your network, like it, tag us at movotes2020, comment below, and make sure you vote. So thanks so much, everyone. Happy voting.